Shipped out for Luka Doncic, he remarkably predicted the blockbuster exchange before receiving any official confirmation, unraveling the complete narrative of how this historic transaction actually materialized behind closed doors. Lounging in bed enjoying a film with his wife, Anthony Davis remained unaware that his professional legacy was about to violently fracture. Alongside his profound revelations during the Draymond Green broadcast and the ensuing shockwaves, exposes a truly unprecedented chapter within the annals of professional basketball lore. That monumental Slovenian superstar exchange completely shattered the league's foundation in February 2025, placing the towering big man firmly at the chaotic epicenter. As the cinematic glow illuminated his bedroom, the veteran champion remained entirely blind to the impending professional storm. He eventually unpacked the raw truth during a digital broadcast conversation with his peer. Relaxing that quiet evening alongside his spouse, his phone suddenly displayed an incoming dial from Lakers architect Rob Pelinka. Opting to ignore the ring, the Star Center soon received a follow-up message requesting a return conversation at his earliest possible convenience. The front office merely needed his perspective on an impending matter. Assuming standard operations, the veteran planned a morning callback, feeling absolutely zero sense of impending dread. His powerful representative similarly attempted contact, which also went completely unanswered. Frustrated, the agent bypassed him entirely, dialing his wife to urgently demand a direct return conversation. The evening's tempo instantly accelerated. Curiously, prior to this night, the dominant forward and his agent had held numerous analytical discussions regarding the brilliant Dallas prodigy. These conversations lacked any transactional motive, simply representing pure appreciation for athletic brilliance. The veteran frequently mused about the devastating potential of partnering alongside the young maestro, especially while navigating the heavy, lingering uncertainty surrounding whether LeBron James would fiercely continue his legendary career or quietly walk away. The concept of an unceremonious departure never surfaced. His reflections purely targeted impending legacy chapters. The Slovenian maestro mirrored his legendary teammates' imposing physical stature, visionary playmaking, and relentless scoring punch. Consequently, as his confidant delivered the earth-shattering update, the center's analytical mind instantly gravitated toward the solitary Texas asset, whose value could justify sacrificing a 10-time All-League selection. Upon hearing the destination city, deep disbelief washed over him, prompting a fiercely skeptical demand, asking exactly which caliber athlete was returning. Guessing the prodigy's name, his agent verified the swap. The champion forcefully dismissed him, convinced it was a cruel practical joke stemming from the deep, established friendship shared between his advisor and Mavericks executive Nico Harrison. Convinced they were executing an elaborate prank, he brushed off the tension. But the gravity of this unbelievable scenario rapidly solidified into a harsh, undeniable reality. Moments later, the Dallas executive called him directly, delivering a fierce declaration about finally fulfilling a long-standing vow to permanently acquire his coveted services. Despite this profound sincerity, the athlete remained highly skeptical. Needing to process the sheer madness, he quickly promised a return dial. Reaching his general manager, a definitive conversation confirmed the shocking reality. He was exchanged for the brilliant European prodigy. Yet, remarkably, after absorbing this staggering truth from his advisor and both executives, a profound psychological denial still aggressively clouded his acceptance of the brutal new reality. Desperate for proof, he checked premier online insiders, finding absolute silence. Heading upstairs, his device flashed an urgent inquiry from Joel Embiid, another prominent athlete called, refreshing the insider feed. A quick glance finally displayed the undeniable, published confirmation of the historic transaction. The towering athlete later confessed that deep, visceral anxiety washed over him, leaving him paralyzed by the moment's magnitude. That singular telephone transmission unequivocally altered the entire trajectory of professional basketball history. It remains a profoundly surreal evening in sports lore. A 10-time recognized titan discovering his legendary path was being uprooted and shipped to Texas to acquire a singular, transcendent force of nature. Comprehending the gravity of this juncture requires a deliberate journey backward. We must trace how this brilliant playmaker evolved into the premier cornerstone in Texas and carefully examined the agonizing organizational calculus that eventually forced the franchise to part ways with him. At merely 19 years of age, the precocious talent was selected third overall by the Atlanta Hawks during the 2018 professional draft. Carrying the immense weight of being the most celebrated international prodigy ever evaluated, he was immediately rerouted to Dallas during a chaotic evening. The complex exchange involved surrendering the fifth overall selection, Trae Young, alongside a safeguarded 2019 first-round asset eventually utilized to secure Cam Reddish 10th overall. Arriving stateside, he possessed an aura of unparalleled anticipation, carrying a dominant reputation forged entirely through his breathtaking competitive achievements while starring for Real Madrid. There, he earned the 2018 EuroLeague Most Valuable Player award, leading his squad to the title. At merely 18 years old, he systematically dismantled seasoned professionals within the most tactically demanding athletic environment outside the North American spotlight. His entrance signified the brilliant dawn of a vibrant new chapter for the organization, arriving precisely as the monumental, championship-defining journey of iconic franchise pillar Dirk Nowitzki approached its bittersweet twilight. The legendary marksman mentored the Phenom for one campaign before retiring in 2019. Instantly embracing the spotlight, the prodigy captured the prestigious first-year award for the 2019 season. His debut statistics revealed undeniable greatness. The confident maestro effortlessly delivered 21.2 points, 6 decisive passes, and 7.8 captured boards nightly. Orchestrating 7 breathtaking triple-doubles, his complete mastery earned him a virtually unified selection as the top first-year player, securing 98 of 100 premium ballots. A brilliant escalation followed. During every campaign, the star grew significantly more polished, transforming his lethal arsenal into an impossible defensive puzzle. Over his 6.5 transformative years wearing blue and silver, he earned Supreme League honors 5 separate times while matching that total in showcase exhibition appearances. He ultimately shattered historical precedent, cementing himself as the lone competitor to secure 5 elite recognitions before turning 25. He remains the organization's undisputed king of multifaceted performances, holding the paramount benchmarks for total offensive volume across a single campaign alongside the most devastating individual scoring night. 73 monumental points. That masterpiece, orchestrated against Atlanta during January 2024, served as a terrifying exhibition highlighting the truly extraterrestrial nature of his overall talent. That relentless barrage completely shattered organizational ceilings, officially matching the 4th highest individual scoring total ever recorded in professional basketball history. Wilt Chamberlain at 100, Kobe Bryant at 81, Devin Booker at 70, and then this brilliant guard at 25 years old. Throughout 2021 through 22, he posted 28.4 points, 9.1 rebounds, and 8.7 assists, propelling Dallas into the conference finals. Dallas ultimately succumbed in 5 battles against Golden State, yet 2 years later, he successfully propelled the franchise toward entirely unprecedented heights. He willed Dallas into the 2024 championship series, permanently cementing his legendary status among basketball immortals. Fueled by his brilliance, the roster secured a 50-32 regular season record, aggressively advancing straight into the grand finale. Ultimately, the Texas roster fell to a dominant Boston juggernaut across 5 hard-fought contests, yet, even amidst that agonizing heartbreak, his individual brilliance remained breathtaking. The opening battle alone featured him unleashing a spectacular 30 points alongside 10 crucial rebounds. He stood as the only man since Tim Duncan back in 1999 to drop a 30-point double-double during his championship series debut, etching his name alongside basketball royalty. By Game 2, he had single-handedly rewritten the Dallas record books, capturing the first finals triple-double in the history of the organization with 32 points, 11 boards, 11 dimes, and 4 steals. This was no marginal talent, elevating an average squad. We were witnessing a generational force who had literally dragged an entire city to the championship round through sheer, uncompromising willpower. The superstar possessed a career scoring mark of 28.6 points a night. Not since 1975, when Milwaukee shipped Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Los Angeles, had the league seen a player moved while boasting an offensive baseline of that magnitude. That historical context is precisely what made the ensuing fallout so incredibly staggering. Despite every statistical marvel he produced, the front office ultimately decided to send him packing. When the shockwave hit, the entire basketball community found themselves paralyzed, staring blankly at their screens. Shams Charania pushed that fateful update live at 12:12 in the morning, Eastern Time, on February 2nd, 2025. His fingers literally shaking. The prominent basketball insider had just published what would instantly become the most heavily trafficked breaking news post the sport had ever witnessed, half wondering if it was all a mirage. The lingering question remained: what compelled Dallas to pull the trigger? Behind closed doors, management felt driven to sever ties with their cornerstone due to a relentless, simmering anxiety surrounding his physical upkeep, according to insider accounts shared with the media. A deep, mounting resentment had been quietly brewing throughout the front office, stemming entirely from what they perceived as a fundamental absence of professional discipline. They pointed directly to his nutritional habits and fitness routines, viewing those personal choices as the primary catalyst behind his increasingly frequent physical breakdowns on the court. Even though he arrived at training camp looking notably trimmed down compared to previous years, his mass rapidly escalated back into the high 260s as the new campaign barely got underway. He found himself sidelined for 5 matchups as November drew to a close, sitting out under the official team diagnosis of a strained right wrist. However, that prolonged time away from the hardwood was essentially a shadow mandate for him to reclaim his physical fitness. This battle against the scale was hardly a novel revelation. Internal whispers confirmed that the superstar showed up to preseason activities carrying well over 260 pounds for the second straight autumn. On paper, his official playing size stood at 230 pounds. In reality, he was hauling around an extra 30 pounds of completely unnecessary burden. While his sheer basketball genius allowed him to systematically dismantle opponents regardless of his frame, the undeniable truth remained that he dragged a compromised physique all the way to the championship round. Management viewed this trajectory as a ticking time bomb. The escalating wear and tear had already restricted him to a mere 22 appearances that year, battling a relentless cascade of physical setbacks. A strained calf suffered on Christmas Day had kept him completely off the floor, though he was quietly plotting a highly anticipated comeback just before the mid-season All-Star festivities kicked off. Beyond the physical concerns, a massive financial reality loomed large. Back in 2022, he inked a 5-year, $250 million maximum agreement, complete with an opt-out clause slated for 2026 to 27. Fast forward to the impending offseason, and the franchise face stood at the precipice of demanding a historic 5-year, $345 million supermax extension. Yet, the moment the transaction processed, that exclusive avenue to generational wealth vanished. That specialized contract tier would have guaranteed him approximately $116 million above what any rival organization could legally bring to the table. Stepping in front of the microphones, Dallas architect Nico Harrison attempted to control the narrative by anchoring his justification entirely around the defensive side of the ball. Speaking to the press, Harrison insisted that guarding the perimeter ultimately captures banners, arguing that acquiring an elite rim protector alongside a historically great two-way talent simply provided them a vastly superior roadmap to a title. He proclaimed the roster was calibrated for both immediate and future glory. Meanwhile, owner Patrick Dumont retreated into boardroom terminology, coldly categorizing the massive shift as simply reallocating asset risk. Expanding on his philosophy to the local publications, Dumont painted a picture of historical greatness, urging observers to analyze the ultimate titans of the sport's past. He invoked the sacred names of our youth, Jordan, Bird, Kobe, and Shaq, highlighting how those icons bled for their craft daily, driven by an absolutely obsessive, uncompromising desire to conquer the league. The unspoken accusations settled over the fan base like a suffocating fog. The brass fundamentally believed their generational prodigy lacked the mental fortitude and unwavering dedication required of true champions. Peeling back the curtain, however, revealed a far more complicated reality. The organization openly admitted they never bothered to canvass the rest of the association to gauge the market value of their pillar. That startling admission ignited a firestorm of backlash, as pundits and executives alike recognized that a simple phone call could have sparked a historic bidding war, ultimately yielding a vastly superior treasure chest of assets. The general manager operated under the paranoid assumption that if his star caught wind of the betrayal, the guard would hijack the process, weaponizing his 2026 escape clause to force a predetermined destination. Opting to quietly exile arguably the most brilliant young mind in basketball without actively exploring the open market rapidly crystallized as the most indefensible failure of the entire regime. Earlier in his tenure, the general manager had carefully maneuvered to silence Mark Cuban, convincing ownership to permanently strip the outspoken billionaire of his notorious meddling habits within the basketball department. With ultimate authority secured, he pitched the blockbuster transaction strictly as a pragmatic financial pivot, feeding his inexperienced superior a highly curated narrative rather than the comprehensive, unvarnished truth required to make a franchise-altering move. In the aftermath, a deeply remorseful Mark Cuban publicly mourned his choice to hand the keys over to the new ownership group, dropping heavy hints that he vehemently opposed the catastrophic exchange from the very beginning. When the paperwork cleared, Los Angeles secured the superstar alongside Maxi Kleber and Markieff F. Morris. In return, Dallas acquired Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a solitary first-round draft selection far out in 2029. Utah operated as the silent third partner, absorbing Jalen Hood-Schifino along with a pair of future second-round draft assets to help facilitate the math. Because the incoming big man graciously agreed to forfeit his $6 million relocation kicker, unloading that massive max salary miraculously allowed the Mavericks to duck beneath the punitive luxury tax threshold. They had surrendered an era-defining offensive maestro. Their ultimate prize? A 31-year-old center carrying a terrifying medical chart, a moderately capable wing player, and a single draft ticket that would not cash in for another half-decade. Barely moments into his inaugural appearance wearing Dallas blue, the new center ripped down a violent offensive rebound for a monstrous slam, screaming out an unscripted promise to a crowd that was still actively grieving the loss of their hero. Pacing aggressively along the hardwood, he pointed directly at the logo and repeatedly roared to the rafters that he had officially arrived. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, he was gone. Following an absolutely masterful first-half performance which briefly distracted everyone from the furious mob protesting outside the stadium doors, tragedy struck. Right in the middle of the third period, their fragile new savior crumpled, suffering a debilitating adductor strain. That sudden collapse ultimately banished the 10-time All-Star to the rehabilitation room for 6 agonizing weeks, establishing a grim and painfully familiar narrative for his deeply underwhelming tenure in Texas. That singular afternoon flawlessly captured the entire tragic arc, blinding optimism, deafening expectations, and an absolutely unavoidable physical breakdown. He would go on to suit up for a mere 29 regular season contests, grinding out a mediocre 16-13 record. Sitting out 54 out of a theoretical 83 scheduled matchups, his absence became the defining feature of the campaign. As for the much-anticipated pairing with Kyrie Irving, they shared the court for exactly 25 fleeting minutes. 25 total minutes. An organization willingly discarded the undeniable soul of their city, gambling their entire future on a theoretical powerhouse tandem that ultimately played together for less time than it takes to air 2 quarters of professional basketball. The foundation shattered when Kyrie Irving ruptured his anterior cruciate ligament that previous March, ending his campaign. Consequently, Nico Harrison's grand blueprint, a defensive juggernaut built upon Anthony Davis and Irving, vanished completely. The ensuing public fallout proved seismic. Dallas-born analyst Emmanuel Acho condemned the maneuver entirely, labeling it sheer organizational malpractice, and perhaps the deepest blunder in sports history. The Dallas Mavericks faithful harbor a resentment that time cannot heal, forever condemning Nico Harrison for banishing Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. Management ousted Harrison on November 11, 2025, Analysts universally framed his dismissal as the inevitable consequence of fierce public outrage colliding with an incredibly lethargic launch to that basketball campaign. When the executive finally lost his job, Dallas sat at a dismal 3-8, languishing in the penultimate spot across the entire Western Conference hierarchy. Franchise governor Patrick Dumont orchestrated that November termination, ultimately drafting a profound public apology to the fan base for authorizing the departure of their cornerstone. While Texas collapsed, he delivered masterpieces in Los Angeles, nightly posting 37.1 points, 9.4 rebounds, and 9.1 assists. He elevated his new squad to an 8-3 record, securing fourth out west. That juxtaposition served as a brutal reflection, illuminating their fatal misjudgment. On April 9th, 2025, the Slovenian phenom stepped back onto the hardwood of the American Airlines Center, experiencing the arena for the very first time as the opposition. Management draped every single chair with apparel bearing the phrase "Hvala za VSE," translating from his native tongue to mean "thank you for absolutely everything." As the commemorative montage illuminated the arena, he remained isolated on the opposing bench, quietly brushing away tears. It was an entire metropolis grieving a transcendent talent who never actually desired an exit. He managed a mere 29 appearances in Texas before his exile to Washington during February 2026 for Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson, Marvin Bagley III, and mediocre assets. The supposed cornerstone of that monumental transaction vanished within a single 12-month span. Ultimately, the comprehensive yield Dallas retained for parting with a generational genius amounted to little. They were left holding Christie, a few situational contributors, 3 incredibly lackluster opening round selections, alongside 3 secondary draft choices. Today, the organization sits at 24-53, desperately laying a new foundation beneath rookie Cooper Flagg, secured first overall following a miraculous stroke of luck in the draft lottery. The young forward's impact is undeniably historic. He currently tracks to join luminaries like Doncic, Michael Jordan, and Larry Bird as the exclusive group of first-year players to post 20 points, 6 boards, and 4 dimes nightly following the 1976 league merger. He offers a glimmer of salvation, yet the chasm left behind remains agonizingly vast. Simultaneously, former peer Quentin Grimes fiercely contested the questionable physical stamina narrative that the Dallas brass peddled to rationalize their catastrophic transaction. He entirely rejected the organization's whispered doubts regarding the superstar's physical maintenance and professional dedication, noting that the European prodigy was a constant presence in the facility, relentlessly grinding through midnight shooting routines and rigorous daytime strength conditioning. Regardless of the rumors, if he weighs 270 pounds and carries a franchise to the championship round, let the man weigh 270. It is absolute madness, Grimes passionately declared. He has evolved into an utterly unstoppable force on the hardwood, commanding the association with an unparalleled 33.5 points each evening while wearing purple and gold. The maestro orchestrated a legendary march, delivering 37.5 points, 8.0 rebounds, and 7.4 assists throughout a spectacular 15-2 tear. This majestic run unfolded right up until a devastating hamstring complication against Oklahoma City shattered the entire trajectory of the season. Major networks documented his journey to Spain for a specialized injection therapy, a desperate measure designed to expedite healing from a severe grade 2 muscular tear in his leg. Logging exactly 64 contests, he fell agonizingly short of the mandatory threshold for league-wide accolades, including most valuable player honors. Yet, he plans to file a formal appeal, citing exceptional circumstances against that strict 65-game mandate. Los Angeles must now navigate the perilous postseason crucible devoid of their central architect, certainly for the initial phases of the tournament. Should an aging LeBron James somehow, will this depleted roster pass the opening series absent his star backcourt, his legacy would reach mythological heights. Still, the reality for the franchise remains remarkably bleak. Yet, if they can miraculously survive until their commander heals, a magical championship run remains mathematically possible. Meanwhile, Anthony Davis finds himself exiled in Washington, quietly enduring another grueling rehabilitation process. The decorated frontcourt veteran landed in the capital city following a blockbuster exchange where Dallas also shipped out D'Angelo Russell, Dante Exum, and Jaden Hardy to finalize the transaction. He remains completely absent from the active roster, sidelined by severe ligament trauma in his non-shooting hand that keeps him permanently anchored to the bench. The towering defender is quietly plotting a career resurrection in the district, anticipating a triumphant comeback next year, sharing the floor with Trae Young. However, his recent dialogue on Draymond Green's platform abruptly dragged this tragic chapter back into the glaring spotlight of public scrutiny. The conversation ignited not from rumors of impending moves, but through the raw, emotional vulnerability he displayed regarding the profound betrayal he experienced. He articulated a clear comprehension of the cold corporate logistics, yet expressed a deep-seated grievance over the severe lack of professional courtesy shown by the Los Angeles executive branch. His phone rang a mere 10 minutes prior to the global media breaking the story. Clearly, the front office orchestrated this reality long beforehand. Meaningful negotiations regarding a swap for the Slovenian prodigy obviously occurred behind closed doors, yet those vital details never reached his inner circle. That profound silence, he confessed, remains a lingering shadow. He described navigating a turbulent emotional spectrum in the raw aftermath of the announcement, noting that while logic eventually rationalized the maneuver, the sheer indignity of his abrupt expulsion from California remains deeply unsettling. Ultimately, history offers a merciless judgment on this sprawling basketball tragedy. The transaction stands eternally as one of the most remarkably unbalanced exchanges in league history. Despite Texas acquiring a legitimately elite talent on paper, the reality of surrendering a transcendent orchestrator who is practically 6 years his junior proved fatal. The executive architect has since been purged from the organization, yet his professional legacy bears the deepest scars, forever cementing this particular maneuver as an all-time cautionary tale of catastrophic asset management. A mere 12 months after their golden child dragged the franchise to the championship series for the first time since 2011, management exiled him for an aging veteran who managed to suit up for barely 29 of a potential 83 contests. It is a suffocating irony, considering the primary justification for abandoning their franchise pillar was a misguided fear regarding his physical resilience. The ousted center offered the most poignant reflection of all. Logically speaking, I harbor no fury. The man is a basketball deity. You simply cannot replace that kind of greatness. As LeBron James approaches the twilight of his historic career, Los Angeles has definitively secured its next generational anchor in Luka Doncic to carry the torch. Meanwhile, Dallas is left holding Cooper Flag, an uninspiring collection of draft capital. Alongside the haunting realization of the evening, they surrendered their most transcendent franchise talent since the legendary Dirk Nowitzki. Ultimately, Anthony Davis never shared the court with Luka. It remained a quiet aspiration, a hypothetical masterpiece he occasionally whispered to his representation as pure basketball fiction. So when Rich Paul finally made that evening phone call to deliver the news of a forced relocation to Texas, his immediate reaction, bypassing rational thought, bypassing professional survival, bypassing every other instinct, was to accurately deduce the exact sequence of events. Because, at his core, he recognized the truth. Only one athlete on that squad commanded such a monumental exchange. The most agonizing detail? His intuition proved entirely accurate.